This is a Culture Inject production.
This week we're reviewing and analyzing the first episode of The Nevers. Fair warning, there will be spoilers. I'm Chirag, and joining me today is...
Hello, I'm Sean.
I'm Laura, and this is the Nevers Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the discussion and dissection of every episode of the HBO series The Nevers, an original sci-fi drama from Joss Whedon.
If you'd like to follow us online, visit our website at hbothenevers.com, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube at HBO The Nevers or at The Never Podcast. Stream The Nevers Podcast on Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Amazon Podcast, YouTube and anywhere else that you can stream podcasts.
Any ideas, interview requests, comments or questions can be sent to theneverspodcast@gmail.com. You can please also rate and review our podcast as it helps us move up the charts and get seen by more eyeballs.
Okay, now, for some very professional housekeeping, I'll go ahead and read the synopsis for you guys. This is the first episode called Touched. It airs April 11th, 2021. So 3 years after an inexplicable event suddenly equips them with extraordinary abilities, Amalia, True, Penance, Adair work to protect their kind from widespread, deepening antipathy. Meanwhile, Police Inspector Frank Mundi, played by Ben Chaplin, investigates a string of murders at the hands of a reportedly touched and highly dangerous serial killer named Maladie.
And I'll start us off with the cast and crew. So we've got Olivia Williams as Lavinia Bidlow, Laura Donnelly as Amalia True, Eleanor Tomlinson as Mary Brighton, James Norton as Hugo Swan, and Nick Frost as the Beggar King.
Also, we have Elizabeth Berrington as Lucy Best, Ben Chaplin as Frank Mundi, Amy Manson as Maladie, Pip Torrens as Lord Masson, Dennis O'Hare as Dr. Edmund Haig, and Anna Devlin as Primrose Chataway.
And we have the amazing Tom Riley as Augustus Bidlow. We have Rochelle Neal as Annie Carby. We have Kiran Sonia Sawar as Harriet Kaur. Anne Skelly as Penance Adair, Viola Predijon as Myrtle Haplish, and Zachary Momo as Dr. Horatio Cousins. Written and directed by Joss Whedon. Okay. Initial impressions, you guys?
I really liked the show, first of all. I was kind of worried that I was going to really be excited for it, and then it was not going to be as good as I thought that it was. I really liked the relationship between Penance and Amalia. They're just like this awesome little duo. Just the whole episode as a whole hit really hard in all the right places. And I wasn't sure with the ending to start with, because I was kind of like, oh, this is strange to be given everything, like told everything almost at the start. And then I watched it again and I was actually like, oh no, I do like this. It's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The fact that they gave us some kind of closure, it felt like I don't know, I haven't seen the second, third, or fourth episode yet. HBO shared with us the first four. I've only seen the first one to preserve my integrity as an audience member, but it felt kind of like a very like a wholesome meal on its own, this first episode. Like, I felt satisfied. If I had never watched any of the other Nevers, the first one on its own was very filling for my stomach. Anyways, Sean, you have any initial impressions?
Yeah, well, as a Joss Whedon fan, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And it was quite unpredictable as an episode, which that doesn't happen a lot. And it was nice. It was quite refreshing. And I mean, my favourite part was the opera. The bit at the opera, it was, yeah. I mean, Maladie's entrance.
Oh yeah,
that was incredible, and just some of the uniqueness of, you know, some of the Touched's powers. It was very different to what you would typically see in any other kind of program, and there's been a lot, you know, different programs that have had people with special abilities, but there was just a slight, I don't know, difference with these, especially. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I really didn't enjoy, you know?
Yeah, I mean, this episode is really a 10 out of 10 for me.
Mm.
And I don't say that lightly. I mean, coming off shows like, I guess, WandaVision and, I guess, The Mandalorian, this episode, as a pilot episode, feels like it got off to a really strong start. Like, even when you go back to the pilot of Game of Thrones, it's almost like, I mean, if you take this show in a vacuum, I think it comes out much stronger than the other ones. And this episode in particular is so juicy. It's like a piece of gum. It just gives and gives and gives, and you know, and I feel like my jaws are gonna get tired from masticating. But here we go.
Yeah, no, we said that as well. I said that it was a very strong first episode, because a lot of shows are like, oh, you know, the first one's a bit slow. It takes some getting into. But I feel like this show's really, you can jump straight in and it's entertaining. I feel like the pacing is really good as well. It gives you just the right level of excitement and intrigue. It explains everything in a way that it's not too vague, but also not too in-depth that you're getting bored. But I think that'll go into the overall structure. So if we go on to talk about the story and writing, yeah, I mean, my initial thoughts on the story is that kind of thing. I think a lot of people are, is it just, you know, Victorians with superpowers, and is it going to be like that flat? But no, I don't think it is. It's, you know, it is Victorian London, which is already just very cool. And then superpowers, but you're not sure where they're from. And then obviously at the end of the episode, is it aliens? That's, you know, that's what we're thinking now. But so there's so many places that it can go from here.
You do mention superpowers, and I wanted to just say this straight off the bat. So I feel like there's very strong X-Men parallels, and I know, I mean, just about anybody can mention that, but I mean, there's no way that this show was not pitched as Victorian X-Men. That's definitely what was pitched in the executives' whatever room that they sit in.
Well, I was just going to say that Joss Whedon has written X-Men.
Yes.
And he wrote the Uncanny... Was it the Uncanny X-Men?
Astonishing X-Men. Very, very good. I have
it,
yeah.
Yes.
I love it.
It's very good.
Yeah. I miss Kitty Pryde.
Kitty Pryde is... the films don't do Kitty Pryde any justice. When I tell people she's my favourite character, they're like, what?
So just talking about the X-Men parallel. So we got Lavinia Bidlow is her name, right? So she sits in a wheelchair. She runs an orphanage for the touched. She's the proxy for Charles Xavier, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have Maladie, who is the Magneto, I would assume. But, I mean, phonetically, her name is similar to Magneto. You got the same first consonant, you got the same syllable pattern. Mal means bad. It feels to me like a throwback to Firefly, but maybe I'm just painting where there's no canvas. I don't know. I do feel like the fact that her name is Maladie and it feels so on the nose for a villain name, and the connection I'm making to Magneto, I feel like she's gonna have some kind of a redemptive turn coming up. There's more to her than we've seen in the first episode so far. That's for sure. And then you got the fact that the X-Men were an allegory for civil rights, right? Like, Charles Xavier represented Dr. King, Magneto represented more of the Malcolm X approach, and the mutant gene was the basis of discrimination and fear. So I feel like the touched serves a similar purpose, but one distinction that I would make is the mutants and the touched are... It feels like the mutants are kind of indiscriminately powerful, just kind of like a genetic lottery with them. Whereas the touched, there's kind of more of a will at play. There's more of a conscious, like, discriminatory power that's giving people power. You know, like all the traditional disenfranchised, disempowered people, for example, women, people of color, all that kind of stuff, those people are... those disempowered people are literally empowered with abilities. So I feel like there's a different shade to the Nevers, more of like a spirituality, maybe a god involvement. I know you mentioned aliens, Laura, but I mean, that may be the case. Maybe I'm reading too overtly theologically into it, but it feels to me like a more of like a spiritual God kind of. And I think the doctor at the end even mentions touched or poked by God. So the impression that I got, the event, the touched event, the act of God, seems to me like a catalyst for change. And change is like a big theme, like a harbinger for what the future can become for humanity, what it means, what it needs to become for humanity, you know? Like David Bowie says, changes.
Yeah, no, I think definitely different. Yeah, I said earlier that they all seem to have powers that are toward their personality or their strengths already.
Yeah.
You see in the opening and the ending, that's the same scene of the 3 years ago.
Okay.
You see little bits of their lives, and that, you know, the singer going to audition for the show, she gets the voice, and then and obviously the God alien parallel. I don't know because it's one of those things. It's back in a time when nothing out of this world had been seen before. But I definitely think there's definitely more to Maladie, like you said. But I found the show very easy to understand. There was a very long scene. Well, it wasn't long, but it was very dialogue heavy with all of the men in the boardroom.
Oh,
and with the time turners, the hourglasses, and they seemed like this really important. And we were discussing what they... I don't know whether this was something that was used in meetings in real life, whether it's like this is how long you get to speak, or but they seem to focus really heavily on it. And I'm just, so that caught my intrigue.
I actually have a point to make on that scene. I fell madly in love with that scene. So first of all, if we're talking the Parliament dudes discussing the touched, right? I liked the little dialogue bit where, and now we're talking about the story and the dialogue, where Lord Messine is his name, I think, played by Pip Torrens, Lord Messine. So he kind of relates the event of the touched as a direct attack on the Empire. And one of his fellow peer Parliament dudes asks him, so this attack is expected to come? And Lord Messine replies, it came 3 years ago. And then they read off the date that this event happened. This kind of notorious paradigm shift, like a historic moment, the 3rd of August, 1896. And Lord Messine responds, a Monday. A bit grey. I loved that. When he said a Monday, I loved that. Like, I loved how he kind of just undermines the specialness of that day. He just kind of dismisses it. And that tells us so much about his character. I love that so much. And he just kind of recontextualizes this entire phenomenon as an attack. And, just that scene was so meaty. It was so wonderful. And I know I'm talking a little bit too long, but you talked about the hourglasses being flipped. That, for me, like when the dialogue crescendos in intensity, we see the men on the table flipping those hourglasses with very noticeable, accentuated, like a thud each time. And it felt kind of rhythmic for me. Like the turning of the hourglasses, it struck me as something symbolic. Like, because they even mention in the dialogue that the society is coming into a new age, a time of change and revolution and magnificent power. And it feels to me like these men are desperately resisting that and desperately trying to control it. By flipping these hourglasses, they're trying to control the sands in the hourglass, like archaism, kind of like a Make America Great Again kind of thing, where they're preserving their old ways, because with time comes change, and these men are fighting change by controlling time. In that scene, at least, it felt like to me.
No, I agree, because they are very heavily not enjoying any form of change, obviously. Women having all these powers, but not just women, though. But it's more, like you said, all these people that have been downtrodden are now being given the power. And obviously the people at the top don't like that. But yeah, also with, I don't know, we'll probably discuss it more heavily in later parts, but with Lord Masson like you say, it's just, it was just a Monday. But then obviously at the end you see what happened to him on that day, and to someone who we can assume is a family member, a daughter or a granddaughter, I'm not sure. That for him, maybe that day, is more important to him, but other reasons. And we'll learn more about that in the future, I'm sure.
I want to get Sean in there. You have anything to say about that scene? Anything to say about the story or dialogue or scripts?
No, actually, I think everything that I would have said was all covered.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
We can move on to talking about the performances, the actors, the characters. Yes. What did you guys think about that?
Sean, what was your standout?
Well, I loved Maladie, and the performance that Amy Manson played, it was just so incredible. And again, it's that whole unpredictable nature that I love about everything, and that her unpredictable nature it was just so, there was highs and lows everywhere, and you didn't know what to expect, especially in her entrance. The poor supporting artists in the background, they looked absolutely shocked. I think that intenseness came across in that opera scene, and it definitely comes across over the screen. She's definitely by far my favourite character at the moment. I like the inventiveness of Penance, isn't it? Penance Adair, played by Anne Skelly. And I like how they've kind of introduced all of these really great inventions that are quite futuristic in the Victorian era, like the car, and it's like a 3-wheeled car. They're definitely my two favourite characters at the moment. I haven't quite, funnily enough though, warmed to Amalia.
See, I'm different. I really like Amalia. I think she's badass, first of all, right? So she can slap, a 7-foot dude who's attacking her like it's nothing. She is fantastic, and she's strong, and she knows what she's doing, and her purpose, seemingly knows, this is her purpose and this is what she's fighting for. And her relationship with Penance is fantastic. I love them as a duo. I think they're great. It's so funny. And they're definitely probably the highlight of the show for me. But I was actually one of the extras on the back of the stage in the opera scene. And I can tell you for a fact that, Amy Manson, wow, that performance she gives is fantastic in the show. It came across so great. But being there on the day, and it didn't matter how many times we did it, she was just on point. She was fantastic, and it was scary as hell.
Oh, for real? So you were an extra in that scene?
Yeah, I was one of the opera people in the background, and it was such a great week.
If I can ask you a question about that experience, how many times did she run through that scene? Because it's kind of like a soliloquy.
Yeah, I'm trying to see. So we did that. It took 4 days to shoot that bit. That whole scene. So there was a bit that wasn't really even used. Obviously, a lot ends up on the cutting room floor. But, that was probably a good, few hours of that on and off,
Wow.
Don't know how many times exactly, but every single time she did it, it was that powerful.
Yeah, she hit it out of the park. I gotta mirror what Sean was saying when it comes to Maladie and Penance. First of all, Maladie, she really, for me, embodies that broken poetry. In that scene that we're talking about, she gets to literally perform on a stage and tell the world all of her crazy feelings. It reminds me of Avengers 2, where we are first introduced to Ultron, and he monologues on that stage, and he tells the Avengers why they suck and all that type of stuff. It reminds me of that, and she's incredible. I think her, and then Penance Adair, I think, is played by Anne Skelly. That actress is a revelation as far as I'm concerned, because I guess she represents the burgeoning of women in STEM, that kind of thing. But I think the actress who plays her, everything she says is so truthful and just achingly sincere and honest, and all of her dialogues are written in the scriptures. There's not one false word that she says. I I fell in love with her character. Her character is inspiring. She's the most Luke Skywalker-y of them all, I feel like. Or if you want to kind of like give a Buffy comparison, she's the Willow, I guess, to Amalia's Buffy, if you want to put it in that context.
Yeah, Willow and Buffy. Yeah. Just they will become an iconic duo, I'm sure, as famous as Willow and Buffy have become. Yeah, I'm also really liking Inspector Mundi. I love the whole angle of truth thing. I just thought, that kind of comedy is where I'm at. Just those little quips that, you could totally not even notice, but when you pick up on them, they're just hilarious. And the actors, pulling all that stuff off, especially between Amalia and Penance, because a lot of their action and their dialogue is very, very quick. There's a lot of it. There's a lot going on at all times, and it doesn't feel like it's us, which means they're doing a fantastic job.
Yeah. I loved his humorless laugh after he says, "I'm the angle of death." That was wonderful. He's really intimidating in that scene, and also very righteous, which is interesting considering, later on we know that he's indebted to our man Hugo Swan, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of like, what's going on there? The good intention is, you think that he's an honest cop, which is probably hard to find in any kind of time in history, but he's out for the victim. He's not interested in any of this whatever's going on. He wants to find out what's happened to this person.
Absolutely.
But obviously later on we learn that he is in debt in some way, and we will find out what for.
Speaking of relationships between characters, segueing into what relationships kind of stood out to you guys the most?
One that probably stood out more quietly is Horatio's and Amalia's, because instantly you're kind of like, okay, they have a connection, right? There's definitely not necessarily a love interest, but they are definitely very close. And I'm very interested to see kind of, more of that relationship.
Yeah, he says, I think he says when they're getting ready for the opera, or Amalia is, he mentions that dress is a good one for her. Yeah. And I think the audience is meant to take that as a kind of a romantic suggestion. I don't know, at least I did. But of course, he immediately undermines that romanticism with his next remark. He says it'll keep pressure off the wound, which is a very doctor thing to say. So there's a little bit of ambiguity over there. But I think it's a bit strange. I know, because I saw in the opening monologue, we see that the doctor has a wife and a child. So I'm wondering because we don't see them after 3 years hence. So what might have happened to them if they are setting up a love interest? I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, that was my question. I was thinking, I said to Sean, what's happened to his family? Is there something going on here? Time will tell, I'm sure.
Yeah. I know we already talked about Amalia and Penance, but did you guys have any other thoughts on that? Because I certainly do. I feel like that's the heart of it.
Of the show?
Yeah, of the show. Amalia and Penance are kind of the 1 and 2 punch, like you said, the dynamic duo.
Yeah, I think it's a show with a lot of characters thrown at you all at once, which is good because I think it's nice to just, like I said, the show doesn't over-elaborate on any particular thing. It kind of gives everything to you at once, but it's not overwhelming, so it's done really well. We meet a whole lot of characters. But yeah, they are definitely, for me, the heart of the show. I think you see how much they both care, obviously, for everyone at the orphanage and just life in general, and how they want everyone of the afflicted to be, accepted into the world. Yeah, I just love them. I think they're so natural together in terms of acting.
Absolutely.
They just really, really fire off one.
They really gel,
another.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys noticed this, and I don't know if the audience noticed this, but I noticed kind of like a refrain, a recurring piece of dialogue between Amalia and Penance. The very first piece of dialogue in the entire show, Penance says to Amalia, she says, "Mrs. True, you look very fine." And I noticed that's been kind of like a repeating motif, because the first time we see them interact, Penance says to Amalia, "Mrs. True, you look very fine." And she responds, "I think so too." And then before the opera, we see Penance say that again, "Mrs. True, you look very fine." And Amalia responds, "I think so too." And then in the very end, when Penance she kind of discovers Amalia beaten and bloodied and having lost the fight, and she says it again one more time. She says, "Mrs. True, you look very fine." This time a little kind of a bit stuttering on herself. But this time Amalia doesn't respond with "I think so too." And I think that's the moment where the show really tells us the truth about what Amalia what she really thinks of herself. Like it shows us that she doesn't think that she doesn't agree necessarily. And it also, I think, shows us that regardless of what Amalia thinks of herself, Penance will say, "Mrs. True, I think you look very fine." So to me, I sensed a bit of almost unconditional love between the two characters. It's very palpable, and it's very endearing to the two of them. It felt very beautiful to me, almost poetic. The fact that it had a 1, 2, 3 act 1, act 2, act 3 payoff to that line of dialogue. I really enjoyed that part.
She's also almost like Amalia's conscience when they're talking about going and I might have to hit someone, or he had a shotgun. That just that little bit is great.
Yeah.
It's like, oh well, okay. But she just very much doesn't want violence and that. But obviously that's how Amalia's got to take hold of the situation sometimes, because she's got to look after her people. Oh, the bit in the carriage where the Beggar King has got the knife to her face and she says, "It's all right, it's not my face." That line's got me so many questions. What does she mean?
I loved that line. Sean, you got any thoughts?
Well, I definitely do want to see the relationship between Amalia and Penance more. I think because I haven't quite warmed yet to Amalia, I'm still kind of a bit unsure on it. But I definitely think, there is, as you both said, the unconditional love. That is very transparent, and it just comes across. And I think it's not even a case that Amalia needs the support from Penance, but it's the fact that she's always there to give that support.
Yeah.
And I think that will show their kind of dynamic duo type.
And then as far as the scene in the carriage with the Beggar King is concerned, I think even going a little back, Amalia's flippant attitude towards the Beggar King is so interesting to me, because the Beggar King is feared by everyone else, almost in like a Reaver-esque way. He's kind of like notorious. I mean, I guess the better Firefly corollary would be Badger. He's like a scary Badger, but it's also Nick Frost, so I can't help but love him. But
it's so strange to see him in this role.
It is
because you're used to seeing him, play mostly comedy, and he's, the friendly nice guy. And now and it's great to see. It's really great to see him get to play at this.
Love Nick Frost. But I gotta say, Amalia's lack of fear, it feels kind of like an extension of, and trigger warning, it feels like an extension of her suicide attempt, where she's kind of reached a level of fuck all. It's like she kind of, when she leans her face into the blade, it reminds me of the Buffy scene where Buffy bares her neck to Angel. There's like there's a fearlessness of death there that can only come from having been intimate with death. Like for Buffy, her intimacy with death was quite literal with the Angel relationship. For Amalia, it's explicit too, like from her widowhood. And when she says, "This isn't my face," that to me is so clear that there's a deeper anguish hidden behind the smile and the normalcy of her face. Like that's kind of a facade. There's something behind that. There's there's a truth to her that I think is only revealed to us in the very end when a Penance discovers her after her defeat. Anyways, that was my take on that kind of scene. I love that scene.
And on the same kind of sense as Maladie's kind of entrance, there's that intensiveness from the performance actually given by her. I think that it comes across because she is standing up to this feared figure. And again, like you both, Nick Frost, I mean, I love his work, and he's always surprising me with the roles that he's playing. Again, that whole kind of scene in itself, it's just so intense, so perfectly and well executed. It's almost like, the same sort of craziness as Maladie, but more controlled in a more of a controlled manner,
I think that's similar to the X-Men parody that you were talking about earlier, because I feel like both Magneto and Xavier want the same thing, right? They want a world where humans and mutants live together, but they both have such separate, one's radicalized and, just this is the only way we're going to get it, and the other one's trying really hard to just meld with the world and, do it the way the humans want it, essentially, to be as quiet and nice as possible. But I think with Maladie, it's hard, isn't it? Because we don't know what's going on in her head, because she's, from the end scene, we see that she's the only person that remembers what happened. And everyone's obviously just said, you're crazy. But she knows the real truth, or at least what she saw. And that must be really hard, to not have anybody else see or believe what happened.
Totally. Yeah, and I have an essay to say about that. But before we get there,
I was going to say,
I want to talk... Yeah, we can talk about that for 3 days, but before we get there, I want to talk about Augustus Bidlow and Lavinia Bidlow's relationship. So I noticed a little piece of dialogue, like a little Whedonism that I loved in the conversation between Hugo Swan and Augustus Bidlow. When they're in that bedroom or the living room or wherever that place was, maybe the foyer. So he kind of impassionately defends her after Hugo Swan says she's being weird. And then Hugo Swan, the pansexual guy, kind of responds, I'm an ape. But she does push you around. The poetry of that line hit me immediately. Because in the opening montage, we see Augustus physically pushing Lavinia around in her wheelchair. But in their relationship, it seems she's the one who pushes him around.
Yeah.
So just kind of like the reversal, the poetry of that. Salvage what you want from Whedon's writing style. Those are the things that I absolutely love, the little gems of character moments. It tells us so much about not only Augustus and Lavinia's relationship, but also Hugo and Augustus's relationship, because he kind of has that, driving a wedge between people, dividing and conquering. He seems like a bit of a, you take him, you underestimate him to begin with. He could be a very dangerous man, I feel like, going forward. But we'll see. We'll see about that.
Well, I think Hugo and Augustus have this relationship as well as like a duo, because, I feel like obviously they must have grown up together and gone to school together and whatever, but they're so like two different sides of the coin. And whether that's because Augustus has been, obviously suppressed by his family and his sister, like say he's controlled and he's pushed around, whereas Hugo's obviously he's had this life where he's been able to do whatever he wants, basically. And it's fun to see how the two of them can still remain very, very good friends, even though they're completely in different worlds almost.
I think that going on from that, it's like where they are from the different worlds. I'm sure when they're always together, you can kind of see that kind of like, not bad effect on, when you get together and you have that kind of like one of your friends has a bad effect on you, like
influence.
A bad influence. That definitely comes across. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of future things that may play out where that kind of happens. I just feel like where he's a pushover, he may, with Hugo, kind of have that cheekiness and push back a little bit, you know?
Okay, so any other relationships you guys found significant?
Well, there's the relationship between Maladie and the gang members, but at the moment there's not much that we can say about that, I think.
Well, we do know that there must be something to Maladie in order for anybody to follow her. Because I don't think... I mean, nobody's just going to follow like a crazy person. There must be some rhythm and rhyme to what she's going for, some motive she has, which we have yet to see. Have you guys seen any of the other episodes yet?
We did watch them all, yes, the 4.
Oh, you watched all 4 of them. Okay, so maybe I'm in the blind spot. Okay.
So, but we haven't. We're just kind of like trying to ignore those at the minute and discuss this.
So, segueing to the powers of the characters, which powers stood out to you guys in this episode?
For me, I like Bonfire's flame because it looks dissimilar to any flame power I've seen in any other film or TV. She's really controlled and it's like elegant but strong, and because fire's usually all over the place, and yeah, I like the effects on it. It looks really great.
For me, it's Penance's ability to see electricity. I just love that idea and the fact that she can see energy, and it reminds me of Heroes with Micah. It's done in such a unique way, and it's so different, and it's just the fact that, as we said before, with how their abilities seem to kind of go off of their personalities, and we see that her creativeness was there before she got the ability. It's just nice to see it, that it's developed and she's actually now taken control of her skills and using her ability to assist in that.
It's very much the abilities are just enhancements of what these people are already, what skills these people already have. She must have, she already had a kind of adeptness with technology and inventiveness and that type of thing. And I just love how her character's kind of looking up at the horizon. I mean, we see that in the beginning shot. She's kind of looking at the horizon, and she's inventive and creative and building new things, and she's really the standout for me. But in my opinion, the character, I think her name is Mary Brighton, right? The one who has the ability to sing in that kind of way. In that scene when she sang at the opera, I think that, first of all, that was a beautiful scene, and I may or may not have rolled a couple of tears in that scene, because, oh my god, first of all. Second of all, I feel like Maladie in that scene for a brief second re-experienced what she'd remembered from being touched, from that event. She re-experienced God, that ineffable thing that she couldn't articulate in her broken poetry speech. I think it kind of, that revealed to me that all of the touched are these interconnected beings, and there's this idea of togetherness and this very spiritual idea of oneness, this light holding them all together. And for me, Maladie's crime in that scene was trying to take individual ownership of that feeling by kidnapping Mary Brighton. I think she refers to her as the angel. She kind of makes a lot of theocratic references in that speech she gives on the stage, one of which being that she experienced God, and everybody in the audience turned their back on him. And the first scene that we see when she appears is her killing the devil. So it seems that's a very hero thing to do. So I think there's a hero, like a nucleus or a kernel of a hero hidden inside of her that I'm very excited to see play out.
Yeah, I think that goes with like what I was saying earlier. We don't know what she's going through, having seen what everybody else has forgotten they saw. we don't know that's affected her. And yeah, like you say, she comes up, I've killed the devil. I thought you'd be happy. Who's to say she, if she thinks she's doing what's right, that's all she knows what to do. I really like how Amalia's ability to glimpse the future is shown, because she has no real control over it. And that's really interesting because it's a super powerful ability to see the future. It's a very dangerous thing because it's like, do you try to change it? But the way it's like an anxiety triggered thing, and she does the little hand exercise to try and keep herself. But the first time we see her, before we know what her power is, and in the house when they're getting Myrtle, and you just suddenly she's on the floor and she's looking at these children and you're thinking, what's happening? Is this, you're not quite sure. And then obviously in the fight scene, she's there. You're like, oh yeah, she glimpsed that she fell into the future. But for her, it's like a whole body experience. She's not just seeing it like a lot of other people with a future seeing ability, have a vision or whatever. She's literally, it's a whole body experience. She is pulled, against her will, essentially, into the future and fully experiences that. And a lot of the time it's pain, it's going to be her in a fight, whatever. And then she knows she's got to experience that again at some point.
The fact that her little glimpses of the future are confusing make it all the more exciting for me. Because there's no guarantee. Like, if she knew exactly what was going to happen contextually, that might become a little, boring? Maybe that's not the right word, but if she knew exactly what would happen, then she would be on a script, right? And she would be saying specific things and making specific physical movements so that the outcome would be successful for her and for her agenda. But it feels to me like the fact that these are little snippets of almost interpretive, like what's going to happen, what does this mean type of thing, that leaves an element of kind of surprise, even though she can see the future. There's an element of, oh my god, what's going to happen, which doesn't usually happen with people who can see into the future. So I enjoy that part.
I think going off of that scene as well, because you said about Myrtle, I mean, that is an incredible job for an actress to speak all of those languages that is nothing but English, everything else but English. I think that's something to definitely be commended by. It was Viola, wasn't it? Viola Pretigion. And again, there's quite a great comedic ability to have, especially for the show. It just adds that, wait, what moment?
And it feels very Firefly Joss Whedon to me.
Yes.
Because he likes to, I don't know about him personally, but in general, that entire, the sensibility is to explore with language outside of just English. He likes to incorporate kind of international language, which is the next step in, elite writing. So I kind of noticed that, yeah.
Same as Firefly. There's no subtitles. You don't know. You're exactly where they are. You don't know what she's saying, which is great because it puts you exactly where they are. I love that because, these people from Victoria, London know nothing but Victoria, London. She's speaking in tongues. We don't understand it. Therefore, she must be speaking in tongues. It's that fear of the unknown, which is, I guess, the whole theme of the show and life itself. Just people don't know it, therefore they're going to be scared of it and or try to kill it, and people don't like the afflicted.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I think now would be a good time to talk about the score, the music. Do you have any thoughts about that?
See, I love listening to film scores, and I'm a musician, but I feel like whilst I enjoyed the music in this show, it didn't pull me away from it, but it also didn't necessarily attract me at times. Do you know what I mean? It didn't stand out enough for me to be like, wow, that's a great score, I must go and listen to it. But at the same time, I really like the themes that run through. I think it's very well written. I like the song is very interesting. She could have sung in all various ways. I like how they chose the sound of that. Yeah, Sean, what did you think? I'm
actually pretty similar to you. I there's nothing to me that majorly stood out. And I find myself at times trying to think of the theme and several themes in it. And I find myself actually at a bit of a loss. Apart from, again, that opera scene where she sings, that actually is stuck in my mind. But, I mean, I'm familiar with Mark Isham's work. Once Upon a Time, that theme, I love. And it's always in my head. But yeah, at the moment, this particular theme, it's just not quite there for me yet.
I was just going to clarify with, like, I think it's really good. It sets the scene every time they, whether it's a fight scene or they're just going through Victorian London. I think it's perfectly good and interesting. So I enjoy it, and I know that it will probably continue and be great throughout the season. But I don't know, maybe I should just sit and listen to it aside from the show, to see if it grabs me more on its own.
But that's definitely something that I want to do. I guess it must be doing the right job, because you're not watching it and going, oh, that doesn't work with that scene. So it must be actually, working well. It's just, nothing that's too outstanding as of yet.
I'm glad both of you guys qualified that, because I was about to jokingly agree with you, like nails on a chalkboard. I was going to say I hated that, but no, I feel the opposite, and I know it's kind of sounding like I love every inch of this show. I promise it's not, because my standards are on the floor, but I think for me at least, it felt to me like the score was sweeping when it needed to be. It was upbeat when it needed to be. It was beautifully melancholy also when it needed to be. And like in the very end, when all of it was coming together and the event was happening and the magic was being dispersed and all of that really musically got to me. And I feel like Sean mentioned, that it doesn't necessarily, like, the good thing about a score is it shouldn't be noticeable in the quiet moments or in the kind of the normal generic moments. It should just be something accompanying what's happening. And if you notice that might be actually a fault. But when I did notice it, it felt significant to me, and it feels like a score that I might be able to work to or study to or something like that. And at some point in the working and studying, I just I feel like tears rolling down my cheeks while I'm mopping a kitchen. Like it feels like it's moving in the right moments for me, at least. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it's a great score for the show. I think that it's it nails it. I just don't know if I would sit and listen to it. But then I'd say like that, like a show like Firefly, I love the music when I watch the show. I actually have the scores, but I don't think I've ever listened to one. Like it's not one of my like go-to movie or TV score soundtracks, but it's it is great.
Yeah. The main theme bumps though. Take my love, take my land. I still
the main theme, of course.
Yeah. That
and
slaps.
Jamestown.
Jamestown, of course.
Classic.
I think most actually themes from Joss Whedon shows, they tend to stick with you. But yeah, so I definitely want to listen to this again, just to hope that it doesn't change that.
Okay, I think we're kind of maybe winding down. I still have a million things to say, but do you guys have any final thoughts?
I mean, overall, like I said, I really liked the episode. I think it gave us everything that we needed. It was perfectly paced for me. I find a lot of the shows we've watched lately, we found quite, like you mentioned, WandaVision. I found the first 3 or 4 episodes at least to be quite slow. And it was nice to just be thrown into a TV show, given, like, bombarded with all this information and characters, but at the same time not feel overwhelmed by it. So the pacing and the way it was written and filmed was just perfect for me for the first episode, yeah. Great pilot.
Yeah, I've got to agree. I also think it was great. I too am quite, so with shows, because I find shows quite predictable, I've got kind of the same mindset as the writers that tend to write them. Because this had that unpredictable nature, I found myself more dug into the show than I think any show that I've watched in the last 3 or 4 years. So for me, it was an amazing experience to just watch a first pilot that I was hooked by instantly.
I wanted to mention, and I think maybe we haven't talked about this yet, but the opening montage we see with all the new characters kind of living their lives like it's a normal Monday, I think it was mentioned. I wanted to mention, and a lot of these are kind of, I have a bunch of scattered thoughts that I wanted to just shoehorn into my final thoughts, that all of them, and this is a subtlety, but all of them in that montage are outside in the daylight, except our main protagonist, Amalia, who's in these narrow, dark alleyways. And that stood out to me in terms of an introduction to Amalia. Just that visual contrast, I felt like was enough to tell us that she's not just in a physically dark place, she's in a psychologically dark place too. In fact, like the very first shot we see in the entire show, for that matter, is just a shot of a staircase, and Amalia's descending it into the darkness below. And if we've learned anything about staircases from the Joker movie, it's that a character descending one isn't a good sign. So I think the show explicitly proves that to us later on with her suicide attempt, obviously. But yeah. I wanted to throw in there that I loved the opening montage. And then, what did you guys think of the Maladie remembering the event? What did you guys think of that?
Straight away I was like, well, that explains a lot. Right? Because you see everybody else just go back to their lives. You're like, oh, okay, no one remembers it. Because when they show it, like I said at the start, I was shocked that they did this reveal, or at least a partial reveal, that it's something out of this world, something is, or like you said, spiritual, something very, very strange that's come over London and, you know, changed people, essentially. We don't know why, we don't know where it's from, we don't know what it is. And now, you know, that Maladie saw it and remembers, so she's got all those same questions that are running through our mind, but she's already coming out of a mental asylum, and so we know that she's got you know, problems with mental stability maybe, or she's, you know, back then people were thrown into these places for all kinds of reasons. You know, we don't know what her backstory is and what she's been through, and now this has happened to her. It's very, you know, I just can't wait to find out more about her.
Sean?
Definitely. Well, yeah, no, it's exactly the same, really. And going off of what Laura said about that basically Maladie's in the same place that we are with all these questions, it kind of actually gives you that little bit of a really good connection to her because of the fact that, yeah, we're in the same place. And it just opens up such a can of worms, really, doesn't it? And so many questions. And that's why I want to watch the next episode.
I want to also. I haven't even seen past episode 1, but in terms of like the question, I feel like maybe I don't have the right answer, but just interpretively, I kind of answered that on my own, where I feel like that kind of that act of God or that moment of divinity that only the crazy person remembers. Like everybody else snaps back into eating bagels and walking to the supermarket or whatever they're doing. But Maladie remembers. And I love this because it feels like a commentary on the real insanity of sane people. Like, that's us. We are the sane people. We are conditioned to assimilate to the status quo, to be sane, to be normal, according to the standardized definition of normal, to prioritize our economic roles in a capitalistic society, and to disregard the sacred, the beautiful, the transcendent, we're kind of almost trained to not see what's in front of our own eyes. And I feel like the fact that Maladie saw it, she's almost like an inspirational figure in that sense for me. Like, I loved the fact that she remembered it, and I want to see her redeemed or actualized in some kind of way. I want to see her accomplish something meaningful outside of her obvious mental illness. I want to see her maybe transcend that. Maybe that's just me.
No, I think people are going to definitely agree with you. For me, it's kind of like you've seen her jump into this show and you could just go, oh, she's a crazy person, she's the villain. But then you see this at the end, and now they're telling us the whole time how the afflicted, the touched are treated, and how as a whole they're alone, you know. They're a group, but they're alone. And if you are one of the touched, then it's kind of, you know, what do? And you feel scared for yourself. But they're not alone because there's many of them. Maladie is really alone because she's not just one of the touched, but she's the only one that remembers. So she's not just got this affliction, but she's the only one that remembers what actually happened for them to gain it. And that's, you know, just makes her a really, really interesting character.
Yeah. She's arguably the most intriguing character, that's for sure. So I have a couple more questions. So for me, like, what did you guys think of we had a beginning montage. What did you guys think of the end montage, where it's kind of revealed how the event happened and what the effect it had on the people, Amalia's suicide attempt, all of that kind of stuff? What did you guys think of that scene?
The little specks of light, and how they just fell on it looked great.
It brought everything together, but at the same time opened up even more questions. I think, again, for a first episode, where it kind of does show you that it's just so unexpected.
I wanted to mention, and again, this is another subtlety, but the scene with the little girl fainting, and I think, Laura, you mentioned it might be Lord Messiaen's granddaughter, maybe it's his niece, maybe it's his daughter, maybe it's his cousin. I'm not sure. Probably not a cousin, but the scene with the little girl fainting immediately followed by the scene of Amalia True awakening from having tried to commit suicide. It feels to me that in the context of it being a just as God or any amazing force that has creative power, it also has a kind of a destructive power. Like, we see the little girl fainting because she's presumably destroyed by the same power that created the wonderful abilities in all these other people. So here it takes the little girl's life, and there it gives renewed life and purpose to Amalia. It's a very, to me at least, it was a very beautiful depiction of the duality of all things. How good and bad have the same energy behind them, are produced by the same power, because it does all this, you know. And I think ultimately it feels to me like a catalyst for change. Like, it's the universe trying to create change within itself for some designed reason.
Yeah, no, I really liked that, because you're just thinking, yeah, everyone's been given a power, and then you see what's happened to her, and you're like, oh, I mean, I'm assuming that she's dead, and that gives another side to Masson, because it's like, not only does he hate that the world is changing and he's in a position where he doesn't want that to happen, you know, job-wise and, like, class-wise, but he's presumably lost someone very important to him through this event as well. So he's got this, like, deep hatred, presumably, for these people, because they've all been given a gift that's what they say, it's a gift. And in his eyes, well, why wasn't his daughter or family member given a gift? Why was they had something taken away? And it is very much like religion, often gets people questioning, if there's this almighty God, why does bad stuff happen?
Yeah, very true. And then again, like trigger warning part 2, but diving a little more deeply, pun not intended, into Amalia's suicide attempt.
Yep. It's really brave to kind of just straight away give us this very, very dark introduction to a character who you now see especially running around, doing her utmost, looking after all these other people. Is that a way for her to not look at herself? Putting everybody else first because, does she want to look at her own life? Is that also while she's been given, we were saying about people getting powers that reflect who they are, is that why she's had a power to glimpse the future? For someone who wanted to end their life, is it a good thing for her to be able to see glimpses of the future?
I suppose it's that kind of where she's been given that second chance as well. She's now doing this whole orphanage running around. It's almost as if she's trying to make amends for trying to kill herself the first time by trying to do good and help others.
Sean, I want to rephrase the second chance as a rebirth, because
yes.
For me, like when I watched that scene, just in terms of mythic symbolism, it looks to me like Amalia's suicide attempt on that night was a kind of a death and a rebirth, because she leapt into the belly of the whale to destroy herself, presumably because the pain of widowhood made life not worth living. And her reemergence from that amniotic pool is a kind of a rebirth as something entirely new. Like as someone with a new ability, a new responsibility, a new purpose to subsume herself in service to. And the grief of widowhood doesn't go away, but now she at least has something to fight for. And I love that in the very end, when we see her hit her lowest in this episode, when she's beaten and drunk and getting into fights, the show shows us, it cuts to her. I mean, it shows us the whole sequence of the event, the touched event, the act of God. But then it shows us at the very end, it shows us Amalia climbing back up from her low point of the suicide attempt. And for me, the message was, if she can climb back from the lowest of lowest points you can possibly reach, which is self-destruction and suicide, she can damn sure climb back from the defeat of this episode. That felt like, even though we went all the way down, now we're going back up. I loved that part.
And it also proves the relationship that she has with Penance, because Penance is there straight away to help her build herself back up. She has this family now, essentially, this huge, very unique family.
I think the dialogue, the touch will be safe, and then Amalia responds, they won't be safe, and maybe I'm paraphrasing, and then Penance responds, well, at least they'll be less lonely, and that's a start. And I feel like that says so much in so little words. And, I haven't seen second, third, or fourth episode. I saw a glimpse of some other reviews that were coming out, and they weren't all positive, which is incredible to me. Because when I take this show in a vacuum, at least in the first episode, it's just perfect. It's 10 out of 10, and I don't say that lightly. So if the second episode is a drop in quality, I don't know. But to me, it's at least something to, keep an eye on. I wonder how this show is going to move forward.
I'm Yeah, now I've loved the first few episodes so much. It's that worry, isn't it? That now Joss has stepped aside. Will it be the same show? Because even with the same characters, the same, storyline, if they know where the story's going for the next however many seasons, which they might already know and have planned, it's that those little, like we said, those little Whedonisms that happen, in the dialogue. When you could have watched that show not knowing it was a Joss Whedon show, and if you're a fan, you'd sit there and go, "That's so Whedon," and then you'd look it up and go, "Oh, it is Whedon." It's just though, and I just got Sean to watch Dollhouse for the first time.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Dollhouse.
He hadn't watched it, so we just watched Dollhouse before this come out. It was perfect timing, actually. But I'd watched it. I watched it when it came out, and then I've got the DVDs and that, so I watched it quite a lot. But yeah, it was Sean's first time, and really liked it. But yeah, it's just those, when you're watching a Whedon show, and
definitely,
even if you had the same writers and the same everything,
He's
those
very
little
distinct.
bits of direction. Yeah, it's so distinct. So will it be? It won't have the same heart, I don't think.
which is a complete shame, really, because I absolutely love everything Whedon, and however, I am completely jealous that both of you have had some sort of encounter with Joss Whedon, because I haven't, as of yet, but you never know. But yeah.
Okay, I'll hook you up. Your next birthday party, he'll come over.
Yeah.
We've got a treat for you, Sean. He's on the show next week. Can you imagine?
Well, any closing thoughts for you guys?
I think I was really blown away with it. I think, as we are all such Whedon fans, it's easy to get your hopes up, and I think I tried to really not to get too excited in case I was let down, which then meant that when I did watch it, I was really blown away, because if you set your expectations here, and it was just way up here.
If I can interrupt you for just a second, like when I was watching the pilot episode, I felt like I was watching it in the middle of a tornado. I was so blown away. Honestly, like, I'm not even biased. I'm just saying I was blown away.
That's what I was going to say. People will say, "Oh, you're biased. You like all things Whedon. You're just gonna like it." It's like, no, I can find fault. Dollhouse. I love the show and the arc, but there are episodes that are slow and not really much happens, and it's kind of like this sometimes. Firefly, not so much. Firefly's pretty solid as a TV show from start to finish. I mean, there's so much of Buffy and Angel to go through that it's there's a lot there, but this, I don't know, I think this is definitely on another level for people to enjoy that aren't just Whedon fans. It's kind of show I'm like, everyone's gonna love this, everyone's mum and dad is gonna be able to watch this. This is like the potential of the next hit show just on TV everywhere, not just like, oh, it's the next big HBO show. This is like, I feel like everyone will watch and enjoy this.
I don't want to say anything now, because that was like perfect what you said. But Laura can vouch for me when I say I'm very critical about the things I watch.
He's really harsh, yeah.
I'm very harsh, and considering, on a first watching this, I literally had nothing negative really to say. That's something quite impressive.
Yeah, I mirror you totally. Like, I watch things in a very dissective way. Like, I watch TV shows with a scalpel, and for me, I didn't perform any surgery. It's perfect the way it is for me. And maybe the second episode will be a drop off. Maybe it'll be an elevation. I'm not sure yet. But we'll see about that. We'll see the next one, I guess, unless you guys have anything else to say.
I think that's well and truly dissected. I think that was good. So the HBO has launched the official Nevers podcast for the Nevers. It's called The Touch Base, The Nevers. It's hosted by Rooster Teeth's Barbara Dunkelman and Jessica Vasami. They'll have interviews with guests from the show, speculate about what will happen next, and more. You can find them on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get podcasts. So check them out. But obviously don't forget about us.
And wrapping up, so just a little podcast plug. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Amazon Music Podcast, YouTube. We're everywhere. We're omniscient. And for more Nevers-related content, you can visit the web at hbothenevers.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at hbothenevers, and at hbottheneverspodcast, and at hbottheneverspodcast without an A, because that handle wasn't available apparently on Twitter. Comments and questions you can email to theneverspodcast@gmail.com. I would like to thank Laura and Sean for joining us, and I would like to invite them to go ahead and plug their own social medias.
Yeah, I mean, if you would like to follow me and my many geeky endeavours, and also being an extra like I was on this show, you can follow my Instagram, which is LauraJP1721.
I don't do a lot of social media, but I do have a Instagram account for my videography company, so if you would like to follow X Motion Studios, that would be great.
And I'm Chirag, and you can find me on Twitter at Mayan Mailman. So I have no association to the Mayan people, but I was very young when I came up with that handle, and I don't have the heart to change it. It's just alliterative. So you can find me there if you want to, or if you don't want to. I don't tweet anything important. You can find me on Instagram at ChiragM90. And until next time, this has been The Nevers Podcast. Thank you very much.
This episode of the Nevers Podcast was written, produced, and edited by Matthew Yamanashi at Culture Inject Studios. The intro and outro music was produced by Guilherme Moraes. We are more than just a podcast. We're a fan community. You can keep up to date on the Nevers and chat with other fans by visiting hbothenevers.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search HBO The Nevers, all one word, and click that follow button. The Nevers Podcast is not endorsed by Mutant Enemy, Warner Media Entertainment, or any of its subsidiaries, including Home Box Office, HBO, and is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. The Nevers and all names, pictures, and audio clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.